So in a nice sort of continuation of the discussion we were having in the previous panel about witness cooperation, so much of that discussion involved outreach to the community. This panel is devoted to that topic specifically. And we're lucky enough to start with a presentation by Jeff Reisig, who is the District Attorney of Yolo County in California. As we keep saying, his illustrious bio is in your materials. We don't want to waste time with all of that you can read. And I now turn it over to Jeff, and then we will go to the panel after that.
Good morning. So I think this is a room full of prosecutors, but raise your hand if you are a prosecutor. Okay. So I want you to imagine if somebody came to you and suggested that instead of filing a criminal case in your jurisdiction after a crime has occurred, you're going to turn it over to a group of volunteers from your community. And they're going to meet with victims and offenders, and they're going to come up with a way to resolve the crime, the offense, without any official court proceeding, without fines, without jail time, without any punishment. Does that sound crazy? I am from California, and things are crazy there, but I'm going to talk to you about this program, which we've been running in my county since 2013. And the numbers, the measures of success are absolutely unbeatable. So what am I talking about? First of all, a little bit about my jurisdiction. I think I'm one of the smallest counties in the room, perhaps. We're only 215,000 in Yolo County. Is there smaller? All right, small guys stick together. I'm in between San Francisco and Sacramento. We have the University of California at Davis. That's kind of our big to-do there. We're a diverse population, large Latino population, pretty typical of Northern California. I have 7 police and law enforcement agencies, about 115 in my office, 36 prosecutors, $16 million budget. That's just to put it in perspective. California is expensive. We file about 8,000 criminal cases a year, and our DA is a nonpartisan elected office. I'm in my 4th term. So what is this program I'm going to talk to you about? We call it Neighborhood Court. And this is a restorative justice program, and this is the key to our program, is restorative justice. And we initiated it back in 2013 when I went and had a conversation with the police chief from the city of Davis and UC Davis. And I want you to imagine how that conversation went when I went to those police chiefs and I said, hey guys, here's what I want to do. I want to take those cases that you're sending me, and I don't want to file any cases. Just what I started this with. I want to get a group of volunteers into a room, many of whom hate cops and they hate me, but we're going to train them in restorative justice, and we're going to let them decide how to handle these cases. How do you think that conversation went? It didn't go well. They asked me what I was smoking. I assured them that this was something that I'd put a lot of thought into, and they agreed. So we started our program with UC Davis as a partner and the city of Davis. This is a pre-filing program for the most part, so we're catching these cases, as I'll explain, before we file a formal criminal complaint. And there's benefits to the offender from that process, obviously. It's an alternative to criminal court. We never step into court on these cases, never. So what is restorative justice? I think most of us have heard about it, especially prosecutors now across the country. This is one of those buzzwords, right? You're hearing about it. It's a progressive term. We use this as our founding principle for the program. Restorative justice is a process to involve, to the extent possible, those who have a stake in a specific offense, and to collectively identify and address harms, needs, and obligations in order to heal and put things as right as possible. The goals of our program are to put the key decisions in the hands of those who are most affected by crime. And that's the victims and the community members where the crimes are being committed. We believe that it makes the criminal justice system more healing and ideally more transformative. We also are going to show you that it is reducing the likelihood of recidivism, and it gives the offenders an opportunity to reintegrate into the community without shame, without jail, without fines, without punishment, but in a way that makes them feel like they're being welcomed back in. And our recidivism rates for these offenders are incredibly low, which I will share with you. The program is almost 100% volunteer driven. So it's a free program once you get your volunteers on board. We have over 220 volunteers. These are just community members that we've recruited over the years. And the cases that I'm going to talk to you about are, they range across the board. We've started to handle low-level felonies. We're handling resisting arrest. We're handling theft. We're handling batteries. And these are cases that are being decided by the community members with victim input. This is a victim-centric program, which I'll explain more in a minute. How do we get our volunteers? Well, when we started this program, that was the big hurdle. First of all, convincing the stakeholders that this wasn't some drunken dream, that this was a real program we were going to try, and then getting the volunteers on board. We have regular outreach efforts into the communities to recruit volunteers, and just that process alone is building relationships between the DA and members of the community. We're building trust, we're having dialogue, we're out there asking them to join our team. I mean, that's really what we're doing. We do it every year. We do training programs for our volunteers, so we don't just bring these people in and dump them into these conferences. We actually give them about 40 hours of restorative justice training before they're put into action. So what is the process? I'm just going to keep it kind of very simple. Our neighborhood court is a confidential process. It is a meeting that happens between community members, victims, and offenders behind closed doors. It's not open to the public. The participant, the person who committed the offense, must actually accept responsibility in order to go into the program. And what I mean by that is we screen them before we even offer them the chance of going into it. And basically what we say is, if you're willing to accept responsibility, which means don't come into this proceeding and say, I didn't do it, it wasn't me, it was someone else, we might be able to do this. We might. And so they have to start with just that affirmative, yes, I'm willing to accept responsibility and give this a shot. We do have an agreement that nothing that is said in neighborhood court can be used in a future court proceeding if we end up filing a criminal complaint. Occasionally we do, very occasionally we do, if this process fails. And we do that in order to encourage open, honest dialogue between the offenders, the victims, and the community members. So, quick rundown of the process. So the police, they make an arrest, they issue a citation. That then comes to the district attorney. We have an attorney who makes an eligibility determination by looking at what was the offense, what was the harm. We have agreements with our police agencies, so they know exactly what types of cases we are taking into the program. And most important, for me, I think most of you would agree, we require victim consent. So if there's an actual victim in the case, we call that victim and say, here's what we're thinking about doing. We're only going to do this if you say okay. And 99.9% of the time, the victims say, yes, I'll give it a shot. Once that is decided, we have our volunteers who have been trained. We have one who's had, we call it super training in restorative justice, who we call a facilitator or a mediator. They start reaching out to the parties. They talk to the offender, they'll talk to the victim, and then they'll talk to the other community members that are sitting in this process. And the way our program is set up is we have 3 community members who are sitting essentially at a table or in a circle with one of our mediators, the offender, and the victim if they choose to participate. A conference is held, that's what we call it. Instead of a case or proceeding, we call it a conference. And this is a meeting of the community members and the offender and the victim, again, in a closed session, very informal. And I'm going to explain to you what they try and do in this session in the next few slides. But once they reach an agreement, and the agreement is lived up to, the case is gone. We don't file it. And in California, there's statutory authority that allows that arrest to be expunged. So this is a snapshot of a real conference in action. We have our 3 community members who are sitting with the offender that has her back to you, and then one of our facilitators, our mediator. And this is how these things go. The panelists, the community members, represent the community. They represent the community's interests, their perspectives, in respect to the crime that was committed. The mediator is the one who leads this process, basically keeps things moving in a very organized manner. Step 1 of our process is having that group discuss openly about what was the offense, recognizing the injustice, share how that offense affected the victim, the community members, and even the offender. They go through this it's a very set process of naming all of the harms that have been caused by the conduct. Step 2 is this group, again, in this closed session, they try to figure out, how do we make things right? Number 1, how do we make the victim whole? If the victim has monetary damages, they're getting full restitution. That's a prerequisite of the program. No victim ever leaves one of these proceedings without being made whole. But there's other things that come up that they discuss, which could include anything from community service to letters of apology to not diversion programs, but alcohol counseling, drug counseling. And these are all things that the group talks about, tries to come to some agreement about. This is not a firing squad where one side of the table is community members pointing at the offender saying, you will do this, you will do this, you will do this. This is actually a mediation where they come to an agreement. And step 3 is they clarify future intentions. How, as a community, is this group going to move forward in light of the offense, in light of what he or she did, and make sure it doesn't happen again? So, as we all know, the traditional approach for most of our offices is we file that criminal case. At least in my county, it goes to cattle call arraignment court. There's hundreds of people and lots of attorneys, and there's about 5 to 10 seconds for a case to really be considered on the record before it moves to the next step. And in the vast majority of cases, it's standard fines, standard jail time, standard terms of probation, standard. And victims don't have a great deal of input. In the restorative justice approach that I'm going through now, there are customized outcomes to each individual offender and each situation. We're addressing the root causes of the crime, and we're educating that participant in that closed session with community members and the victim about their conduct and how to not engage in that again and accept responsibility for what they did. We say about this program is that we're not interested in punishment, and I know that for a lot of us that just seems counterintuitive, but we say this is not about punishment, this is about making things right and engaging the community and moving forward in a positive way. We have partnerships across the county. Of course, all of our law enforcement agencies, believe it or not, they're all big supporters of this program. Every single one of them has signed off on the offenses that we take into the program. We have a strong partnership with the University of California, Davis, including money, grants that they provide us to fund some of the staffing, and then a list of other groups, CBOs, that we partner with to make this happen. So I did want to just emphasize that victims are the center of this program. We don't run any case without getting their buy-in. And what that means is not only that they get to say yes or no to the program, but they're given the opportunity to participate in that closed session. They don't have to, but if they want to, we provide them an advocate, and we treat them just like we would in any criminal case through that process. A lot of victims don't want to participate. We still can send an advocate in to represent their interest. And at the end of the day, victims can say, I don't want any participation at all, don't even mention my name, but I do want to hear how it turns out. As I said, it's victim-centric, so it gives them a choice, includes them if they like, and they have the opportunity, if they want to be there, to ask questions. As I said, our program was founded in 2013. We were the first program of its kind in California. I do have to give the San Francisco DA, George Gascon, credit because he first mentioned a neighborhood court model to me in 2012. Actually, he mentioned it to, I think, all of the elected DAs in California at a conference. And he kind of started out by mentioning what I did in the beginning. And I looked around the room, and I think most of my colleagues were kind of shaking their head like, this is crazy shit from San Francisco. But I thought that it had a lot of value. And I went and visited George. And his program is slightly different because we say that we supercharged our program with restorative justice, whereas their program was more of a traditional line of community members on one side of the table, offender on the other side of the table, and there were directives being given. That's not how ours works. Since we started our program, it's spread around California. Saw a colleague from Santa Clara. I think they've got a program. Jay, is that right? Is he here? Yeah. We've got 5 or 6 counties that have started programs like this. As I said, we have over 200 volunteers. We've had over 1,400 criminal cases come through the system, or through the program. Our completion rate is 92.7%, meaning 92.7% of the offenders that agree to come into the program complete all of their agreement. We do a victim satisfaction survey so that when victims are part of this process, they can tell us, is it good, is it bad? 94% are satisfied. And even the offenders themselves are telling us, hey, this is a great program. I'm so glad I had an opportunity to do it. As I said, the offenses that were taken into this program, they vary. When we started the program, we went slow. We did real low-level offenses. And over time, as we built up our expertise and our confidence, we expanded. So when we started out, we were doing a lot of alcohol-related offenses. We started taking theft, trespass, false ID, battery. With the consent of the police agencies, we started taking resisting arrest cases. Right? That sounds crazy. Have you ever thought that a cop would say, yeah, I'll do this program with a bunch of community members deciding what happens? They're all on now. They're all in because it's been so successful. It's also helped them avoid a lot of litigation, for whatever that's worth. We're now doing low-level felonies, so embezzlement cases, auto burglary, auto theft. There are only a few felonies left in California, so. Our recidivism rate, and here's the money, right? I mean, here is the money of this program for you data people out there. We tracked our recidivism rates using California Department of Justice crime data rap sheets, the gold standard. And after 1 year, we showed a 3% recidivism rate using conviction. And in California, we use conviction as the Attorney General's sanctioned way to measure recidivism. I like to use rearrest. It just feels more accurate to me. But even using that, it was 4.8%. I think that's a stunningly low number. After 3 years, the conviction rate for rearrest was 10%. For conviction, it was 6%. And then you can see that we are measuring first-time offenders versus recidivists. This isn't a first-time offender program. We take people that have lengthy rap sheets. We don't take sex offenders. We don't take the things that we probably all would agree on. No domestic violence, no crimes against children, nothing like that. No uber violent crimes. As I said, we are expanding it, however. We've taken numerous felony-level property crimes, which have gone really well. We're expanding into blended cases. What I mean by that is sometimes we will file a criminal case, and certain aspects of it, like if it involves driving under the influence, we're not going to take that into this program. But there may be other parts of the incident, including a resisting arrest, that we will. And so we'll have a criminal case on the DUI and a neighborhood court on the resisting arrest. Again, the cops think it's a great outcome. We're doing welfare fraud. We've covered the whole county now. We're doing Spanish language only conferences because our population is heavy Latino. And we've just recently started to handle cases where people suffer from drug addiction or mental illness and have an existing case plan with a social worker. And this is a big hill to climb, as you all know, because it's such addiction, especially, such a challenging topic. But in California, you may know that there are no felony-level drug offenses anymore for possession. So methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, it's all misdemeanors. You're not really going to jail for any of that anymore. It's a ticket. So if we get them into this program, we're actually finding early, and it's early, that we're getting better results. So that is it in a nutshell, and if I have any time, I'll take some questions. Yes.
Is your PowerPoint going to be available to us somewhere?
I believe it's in the conference material. Yes.
In the brochure that you've got electronically, there's a page that you can click on, and that links you to all the materials, which I believe has Joseph's help.
Yes, in the back.
I'll have any questions. One is this, about a year ago, my brother had a situation that arose where I think this program would have been extremely beneficial. The available options for him within the traditional system were not as good as I think this would have been. It involved a financial crime taking advantage by somebody who's actually pretty closely associated with the family, and this would have been a very helpful program. The question I have, I might have missed this, is if this doesn't work out, then do you go on to the regular criminal track? Correct.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we make that initial decision at intake on whether or not ethically we would charge the case, right? And so that's always the starter. And then if you say yes, we would, then the next question is this appropriate for neighborhood court? If they fail out of neighborhood court, then we will proceed with the traditional prosecution. It just doesn't happen that often because most of the agreements are honored. And what I didn't mention to you is when this group comes up with this agreement, and it can include a laundry list of different things. Whatever the community members want to have done, if they can come to an agreement with the offender and the victim, we track it. So we actually have a company that collects a small diversion fee from those who can pay. So the offender has some skin in the game. And they track those agreements and make sure that they're completed over time. So my office isn't doing that. The staffing levels to run a program like this, I'm a small county, and we're doing it. I think any county can do it, and frankly, I think it's getting to the point where volunteers can do the vast majority of the work other than the screening. Yes?
What's the cost of that case management that you guys deal with the defendant?
I want to say it's about $200. We have a fee waiver if they're indigent, and so that gets used a lot. But it's an ability to pay, and it ends up generating enough money to keep the company engaged in the program. Any other questions? Yes?
So can you give us an indication of why or how we have such great results from the victims, or how the victims are getting no satisfaction out of this program?
I think, good question. I mean, when we started, we weren't sure how this was going to go with the victims, but what we found is, again, by engaging them right from the beginning about whether or not they would approve of this program, and then assigning an advocate to them throughout the process, they felt like they were getting more of our time and more of our attention than I think they knew they would get in court, and I know that to be true. The results at the end of the conference, what they've told us is they feel less afraid. They feel less afraid. They feel like the community has their back. They feel like the offender understands, what happened and how the victim was harmed, and it's just a different feeling. So I think our satisfaction rates even shocked me how high they were, but that's it in a nutshell. Yes.
You talked about over 200 volunteers. You talked about grants from the college. What's the ultimate cost on it?
So we did get a big federal grant in 2014, and that was over $1 million, but I would say that our annual cost to run this program is about $400,000. And keep in mind, California, we are super expensive, right? I mean, an attorney costs me $180,000 a year, basically an entry level with all of the benefits and everything stacked on. But I run the program now with one attorney, and then a paralegal, and a support staff. And I think you can do it with even less. Any other questions? Yes, very valid.
You said that you offer training to the volunteers. Is that like a curriculum course, or is that just something you made up?
Yeah, good question. It's a curriculum course that we, when we first started, we partnered with a group out of the Bay Area that specialized in restorative justice, and they put on, it was a weekend course, so it started out just being 16 hours, and then we expanded it. I will tell you that at this point, we've done the training so much in our office, our people are able to do it on their own. So the panelists go through a block, anywhere, it's actually about 32 to 40 hours. And then the mediators go through 60 to 80. And there's ongoing training and restorative adjustment. Yes?
What's the typical time frame from initiation, I guess, the review with the facilitator to case closure? What's the kind of?
Yeah, great question. It depends on the nature of the offense, but it's anywhere from 45 to 60 days. So they're moving, much quicker than the traditional system as well, which is nice for the offenders. In the very back.
Is there a mechanism for offenders who've gone through the program to then become one of the panelists?
Yes, we actually just started doing that last year. We had to really kind of think about that, but this program is a community-based program. The community is supposed to represent everybody, and we had offenders that had gone through the program and were so changed by the process that they wanted to participate. And all of the other volunteers agreed. We don't really make changes to the program without including the volunteers, and it's been great.